Hey everyone, I'm Terry, and today we're going to do some work on the drive shaft of my BMW Z3. Let's dig in. Today's project, I want to replace the flex disc on the drive shaft. There are a lot of cracks, so I want to go ahead and get that maintained and get that replaced out. While I'm under there and I have access to the drive shaft, I'm going to inspect the center support carrier bearing, and if I need to replace that, I will do so. I have a replacement one just in case. So we're going to go ahead and we'll do that. And I also want to check out the components for my shift linkage to see if I need to replace any of the plastic bits, so I can hopefully get less crunch when I'm shifting gears and things of that nature. So in order to do a lot of those repairs, that means I have to remove the drive shaft. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Make sure your vehicle is safely secured on some jack stands, which mine is. I pulled my ramps out, and I'm using my jack as support in the event the jack stand fails, because I need to have the ability to freely spin the wheel. Right now my parking brake is on, so that way the drive shaft doesn't move, but there's going to be a point where I'm going to need to rotate the drive shaft to get to the other bolts, and I need the tires to be able to freely spin in order to achieve that. So that's why the ramps are out right now, and the jack is there. The jack isn't holding the car, it's just there as a safety measure. Once you're underneath the car, you're going to have this heat shield. Now, I already removed the exhaust. If you need to still do that, go ahead and check out my other video on how to remove the exhaust off of the Z3. That's already gone, so now we need to get rid of this heat shield that's under here so we can access the entirety of the drive shaft right here, because you can see it covers up that half. The center, so the carrier bearing should be right around in this area here. So you got these 10mm little nut washers right here. You should have 6 of these that we're going to need to remove to drop this heat shield. Just be careful when you pull this down that you don't bend it or anything like that, because you want to make sure you have proper fitting when you put it back in. Let's go ahead and take these off. All right, those 6 have been removed. Okay, there's a lot of dirt that's going to be trapped on top of this. Make sure you are wearing safety glasses, because once you start pulling this up, you're going to have a lot of loose dirt falling directly into your face, and you want to make sure you keep your eyes protected. All right, I'm going to try to see if I can pry this loose. Just like I said, try to not to bend it. I just got a little pry bar here to try to see if I can't kind of shimmy it loose. And then be careful that you're not underneath it, because it'll eventually just pop off. There we go. Whew. All kinds of dirt. So a little bit of play, but it's not too bad. It actually looks pretty good. I'm looking to see if it's all cracked or anything like that. Doesn't seem like it's too bad. I can, it barely moves. So I think it's still in pretty good shape. I'll have to contemplate if I want to replace that right now or not. Oh, geez. You also need to, let me turn you around here. Okay, so here's my flex disc. It's got some pretty deep cracks in it right here, which is why we want to get this replaced. I'll swap out the transmission mounts too. I bought new ones, I just haven't put them on yet, so we'll go ahead and we'll do that. Right up here above The drive shaft is where all the shift linkage parts are located. So I want to try to swap out some of these components down here as well. I bought all of them. I don't know if I'm going to do all of them. It depends on how they look. There's this pin back here that I'm not looking forward to doing. And if it doesn't look like it needs it, I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to focus on the main bits. So let me go ahead and knock all of this dirt and these dead spiders out of here so they're not falling in my face, and get this area kind of cleaned up, and then I'll be right back. Before I start disassembling things, I went ahead and I put some marks down here, kind of match things up, because you want to make sure everything's kind of, the drive shaft is balanced by the factory, so you want to make sure you don't throw it off balance. So you want to make sure you put plenty of marks, try to keep things lined up. And then same thing goes for the flex disc. You have part that goes to the drive shaft, and then there's the part that goes to the actual transmission. So there's arrows built in on these. Some of them, yours might be wore off. I drew an arrow pointing towards the transmission, so because this is going to the transmission, and then I X's to match up the drive shaft, so I know this section is going to drive shaft, and this section is going towards transmission. So that way you don't mess this up when you put the next one on. You want to, you kind of want to make sure you are matching it up. Like I said, once we get this off, there's going to be arrows on here already that point towards the drive, that you want to have pointing towards the transmission. All right, and then if you look, you're going to have, there's this thicker piece, and then that's all one piece here, and then you have this gap right here. Keep an eye out for that as well, because when this rotates, it builds up tension. If you put this orientation on incorrectly, then you're going to have it to where when it builds up tension, it's going to be building it up on the squishy loose part here instead of the solid part, and it's going to make a more of a because it's going to be kind of like a big spring action. So you want to make sure you have it correct, so that way it's going right here. So it's going on the thicker piece, not on this thin piece. But it'll make more sense when I get it off and I can show you the new one and how they have the arrows on it. But this is just so when it's off, I can still kind of match it up. To taking these off, now these are 18 millimeter. It depends on what kind of maintenance you're looking to do. If you're looking to drop the entire drive shaft, you will just have to take the 3 out that are connecting the flex disc to the transmission, and then you can keep the flex disc attached to the drive shaft while you drop the drive shaft. Or if you're just going to do a repair, then you'll have to take all 6 of them out so you can take this out. You'll have to remove there's going to be 6 of these bolts in here, and it's going to be kind of hard to see, but there's going to be nuts behind here. So it gets a little tricky. Some models of the Z3 do have a balancer that you'll have to remove before you can access all this stuff. Doesn't look like I have a balancer on mine. That's going to be like a harmonic balancer that'll be like right here. Mine doesn't have that, but if you have that, you'll have to carefully remove that balancer first. All right, let's go ahead and start taking this apart. Now, before you try to loosen these, if you're doing this by hand with a breaker bar or whatever, you're going to want to have your parking brake on. Otherwise, the drive shaft is going to be spinning on you. So you want to make sure you keep it nice and tight, and then just release the parking brake when you need to rotate it. This is why you want to make sure the rear tires are off the ground, so that way you can easily spin the drive shaft to change the orientation as you need it. Okay, so you're going to have some tight spacing here. You're going to want to get, I'm going to use this 18 millimeter wrench because you can fit this just between the support brace for the transmission to get up here to get to the nut and behind, so that you can break these bolts loose, and then just release your parking brake and spin this as you need to so you can work your way around. You're not going to have room for any sockets or anything back there, So get yourself a good wrench and have some fun. See if you can't get it to come apart here. Now these are pretty tight. Oy. These are really, really tight. Okay, I managed to get the first bolt out. This is the one that connects it to the transmission. I did have to go out and buy a tool right here. This is kind of like a breaker bar for wrenches, so you can get more leverage. I had to buy one of these because when I put my wrench between the right in here, the handle, I only had that little bit right there to grip, so I didn't have the leverage. So I had to buy this bar here to connect to the wrench to give myself more leverage so that I could work it. So I just kind of held on to the nut in the back, and then I used my socket wrench on the front and screwed it out. You just got to hold the nut in the back so it doesn't freely spin. It's really tight, but once you break it loose, it comes out real easy. It didn't fight me at all once I got the initial breaking point met to get rid of that high torque. So let me go ahead now. I got my parking brake off. Now I can freely spin the drive shaft so that now I can access this bolt. So let me go put my parking brake back on so I can pull on this without this spinning. Okay, here's a little trick that I discovered that works for me is when you have the wrench, the crescent wrench on the nut in the back, there's a part of the transmission here that kind of sticks out, and I'm able to tighten up the wrench up against that so that way it doesn't move. That way I can put all of my effort on my breaker bar on the bolt itself, and then when I pull on it, I can loosen it because the crescent wrench is pressing up against the transmission in a way to where I can do this one-handed instead of having to pull on one end and pull on the other. I can now just use, well, I can do it both hands to at least break the bolt loose. Now I can loosen it one-handed going forward. So see, it'll like freely, it's probably gonna fall. It'll fall, and then because I don't have my, I'm using the breaker bar right now, so like right now it like freely spins. I don't know how you guys can see, but like, so what I'll do is then I'll take the crescent wrench off, come back, and then put the wrench back on the nut, and then loosen it some more. Because my socket wrench doesn't want to fit here. The head of the wrench is too big. It hits up against here. My breaker bar has a smaller head that goes onto the socket, so I'm able to use this a lot easier. Okay, so as you can see here, I got all of the bolts out of the flex disc. You can then take a pry bar to kind of push back here to where this will start to slide back. That way you will have some working room here on that inner shaft right there. Now, some people will fully remove the drive shaft if they want to, do this, the carrier bearing, but it's not required. If you're just doing the flex disc, for example, you don't have to remove the entire drive shaft. Once you get these bolts out here, all you got to do then is remove these two 13mm nuts right here holding the carrier support bearing in place to the car, and then this will drop down enough to where you can slide this off that shaft, and then this will drop down for you so you can replace your flex disc. You can also replace your the center support carrier bearing here. You can replace this without fully removing the drive shaft as well. Now, if you prefer to remove the drive shaft before you do this, then you would move back to the rear differential, and then you would remove the fasteners that are back here. You would remove those fasteners right up in there to disconnect it from the rear differential. All right, so I'm not going to remove the drive shaft. It's not necessary. So, and I had did the test before. I did the shimmy and shaking on here before I disconnected the flex disc to see if there was any play. I didn't have any play for my carrier bearing here. So technically I don't think it needs to be replaced, but I might just do it anyway since I'm already gotten this far. I would hate to have to put everything back together and then have to yet again still do it. So make sure if you are going to replace this, make sure you break this loose. I already did some adjusting on mine. Make sure you break this loose because it'll be easier to do it while it's mounted to the car. The moment you take the whole drive shaft off, you're not going to have good grip and leverage to hold the drive shaft. For those of you overseas, you would refer to this as a prop shaft. You would not be able to work with this very easily with it fully removed, and then you'll be forced to use things like a vise that can also damage the drive shaft. So that's why I would recommend keeping it mounted to the car and just undo the front half. This way, you can still use it being connected to the car to kind of hold it in place for you so you're not using a vise and potentially damaging something. I did go ahead and I put my markings in here, so if I do decide to replace this, which I probably will because, I mean, I should. I already bought the parts and I'm underneath here, so I should just do it. Make sure you mark all this because you have these splines here. Your drive shaft is balanced by the factory, so you want to make sure you're putting it back together the same way you took it apart so you don't throw it off balance. Otherwise, you'll have to go to a mechanic that can rebalance this for you. So just have everything marked off like I got there. All right, and it's very humid today, so everything is wet. So great. So I'm actually in my garage, but the humidity is that high. We have water all over everything. That's just gonna make things slippery. I gotta get the drive shaft out of the way, and then I'll be replacing these components when I'm ready to put the stuff back together. So let's just focus on getting it off so I can get to the stuff up here. Right now I'm using a nice big pipe wrench. Okay, it's loose enough to where I can manipulate it with my hands. I'm gonna leave it at that because now I'm gonna go ahead and get these 13s out and see if I'll have enough playroom to drop this off. Okay. There we go. Okay, I was able to slide it off the shaft there. And now I should be able to slide it off the rest of the way here in the back. Like that. The front half of the drive shaft has been removed. So here's the old flex disc that just came off. So I had marked everything so I could remember how I had it all going on. So the prop shaft, so first off, you're going to have the words on one side and there's going to be no words on this side. The side that has the print is supposed to face the drive shaft, not the transmission. So that's your first indicator. This goes to the drive shaft side. And then you got to mark up where the arrows are to know which part gets bolted to the drive shaft. And so originally there's an arrow right here that points this way, where the drive shaft would be on this side. I put an X on that one, so it makes it easier for me to see it. So I know X is drive shaft, arrow is for transmission, and I did that all the way around. So when I go to put the new one on, I can easily match this up and make sure you're putting this on the right way. If you end up putting it on backwards or having the drive shaft the one that goes to the transmission, what's going to happen is when that drive shaft, when you are engaging to move, the drive shaft kind of builds up tension going one way before you first start moving, and then it spring loads it and it starts rotating. So if this is not attached properly, there's gaps right here. So if it's on the wrong ones, when it goes to do that spring load, it's going to be hitting these weaker points, and then you're going to have that kind of happening because it's hitting the weaker point and it's not staying tight, and you're going to end up wearing this out a lot faster, and then you're going to be, in a predicament of having to replace this again, and you're going to have all the noise and vibrations of having it installed the wrong way. So it's very important that you have this facing the right direction, and you are putting the bolts from the drive shaft into the transmission through the correct parts of this. All right, so there we have it. We have the drive shaft rehanging. I did not touch the fasteners on the back. So there you go. So this is proof that you can replace the flex disc or even your center support bearing without having to fully remove the drive shaft, because I just did it. And then you would go and you would get your special three-way claws right here to pull this off, and you could still do this from underneath the car and replace this part. All right, everybody, and there you have it. We got the front half of the drive shaft fully removed. Now you'll know how to go ahead and do that yourself if you have any projects that you need to tackle that involve this kind of procedure. So good luck. Honestly, you would only have to fully remove the entire drive shaft if you're looking to replace the drive shaft, because as you saw, I only removed half of it, and I'm going to be able to do all my repair work with just the way that is. But if you want to fully remove it, that's up to you. Good luck. Be careful not to damage the drive shaft, and make sure when you put it back together that when you're putting the spline back into the front half, that everything is lining up with the markings that you made, so that way you don't throw it off balance. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any other upcoming videos that are going to be tackling more projects with the Z3. And I'll catch you all on the next one. Take care.